this is Shirley, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Southern Gal's Kitchen. We're going to talk today about milling flour on demand. A lot of people are milling on demand now. It's an easy way, and I'll explain why you might want to use that method. You know, when the quarantine phase came in, and women couldn't find, or I guess men too, couldn't find much flour. A lot of times you couldn't find any flour in the store. And people turned to home baking. They bought milling machines to mill their flour. It was rampant. You used to buy these mills on eBay and you could get a pretty good deal, but they're almost non-existent now. People have bought them up, people are buying them. Now I've got a pretty heavy duty professional. This is a wooden one. They make them with a different kind of surface. They're real heavy duty, and they have a lot of times the same mechanism in them. I just like the wood, and so I went ahead and got it. But you can get them a little cheaper with it's a type of recycled plastic, but it's not exactly plastic. They call it something else, but it's very durable. It's your choice. You can get other kinds. There's all kinds of mills. You could do a whole session of mills. You can look online and see reviews. Some grind only certain grains. This one's way heavy duty. You can do oat grunts, you can do all kinds of things in it. You can regrind your grain. It has all kinds of settings on here, from fine to coarse. You make grits and things like that. And some of the mills, the cheaper ones, will often not grind very fine. This will make a very fine professional flour, and the one that comes in the plastic container will do the same thing. The motor, I think, is the same in them. And then there's hand mills for people like those in case you don't have power at some point. That could happen. You might want to have a hand mill on hand. I don't have one, but I wouldn't mind having one. But we're going to talk about milling on demand. Women and men are doing that now. People that bake are milling on demand. And one thing about it, we've talked about soaking grains and then storing them that way because they're soaked and it releases the nutrients. It's easier to digest, so on and so forth. But a lot of people don't want to go through that process. They just mill their grains. Or you can just mill and make your flour fresh. And milling on demand means you're milling and using it that day. Because when you store it, if you leave it out, it's going to start losing nutrients within 24 hours. If you refrigerate it, it's still going to lose some, and it might be 2 or 3 days. And then you can freeze it, and it's going to keep a whole lot longer. I have milled flour and kept it in the freezer for quite a while. But the best and the most popular method now, people are milling and using it. You know, mill 3 cups today, so I'm going to use 3 cups today. You might mill a little extra. If there's some left over, just freeze it in a bag. Now I've got wheat grains here. The hard grade wheat is what a lot of people, they're the most commonly found in the supermarkets if your supermarket sells grains. Health food stores carry more. Some of the grains you just have to order online. I'll order my white wheat berries, which is the softer wheat, soft wheat berries. They make like for cakes and pastries and biscuits and cornbread and things like that. I use the soft white wheat. But they're all going to grind the same way. I've got einkorn here, still in the bag. It hasn't been opened yet. And then I've got spelt grains. I have a lot of spelt grains on hand. I keep them in a Ziploc bag, and then I keep them in a food storage bucket, a big bucket. They stand up, not that tall as my head, up from the counter, about like that. I guess I have the gamer legs on them so I can get in when I need it. I'll generally keep a bag out in my freezer or refrigerator handy. Like a bag of just the grains, a smaller bag even than this gallon, just because you don't want to get in and out of that bucket. When you're storing grains in your bucket and they're not in the freezer, be sure, and I like to put bay leaves in there. It does not affect the taste of the grain at all. I've never had it. And I put them in the bottom and I put some on the top. It deters bugs, even though mine's in the house, they're not out in a shed. Some people use that diatomaceous earth, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that supposedly doesn't, if you ingest it, like smelling it and getting your lungs, it's bad for you. You have to use goggles and a mask. Sometimes I use it around the house to kill insects. It will kill insects. And they say it doesn't hurt if you ingest it. I don't like that idea. Personally, I just use the bay leaves. but people use it and they say it's fine. So, but we're going to talk about grinding the grain. I'm going to show you how to grind it. But I've got quinoa here. Quinoa can be used in your gluten-free bakings. Quinoa is not technically a grain, it's a pseudo grain, it's a seed. And you have to buy the kind that's already rinsed, or you have to rinse it yourself. If you want to rinse it and then grind it, you're going to have to dehydrate it or put it in the oven on a slow oven, low, as low as it'll go, and let it dry. It has to be completely dry before you start putting it in here. You cannot grind coconut flour or nuts. They'll just make paste. Almond, things like that. You can do those in a high-speed blender, which I've done. I make nut butters, but I use my high-speed blender. And it has to be a high-speed blender. It can't just be a regular blender. I've never made it in a regular blender. I don't have a regular blender either, but I don't think it's going to work. If you grind grains in a high-speed blender, with my machine, you need a dry container. And it will do some grains, but it will not get them as fine as this will. You can grind in them, and I did a video on no-knead bread, and I showed you how you could grind in that machine and sift out, and I used a little sifter. You can use this is a really fine mesh sifter. This is a 50 grain, what they call a 50. You can sift out a lot of flour. You make pretty much homemade all-purpose flour with this. You can get as much the bran out or as little as you want, depending. This is a 50, they have a 40 and a 30. I may order a 40. These are very inexpensive. I can get them online, but $10, $11 are not expensive. But it's much finer. I can even tell by looking. You probably can't. This is very fine. And then a 40 would be less fine and a 30 less. So we'll talk about those more and show you how to use them. So we've got, this is regular red hard wheat here. I've got farro. And again, I've got my einkorn and my spelt, and I've got many grains besides that. There's just so many different grains. Like I said, your soft wheats, your white wheat, your red wheat. There's just all kinds. And I do have a variety. I like to buy them in 5-pound bags and keep a variety on hand. But you got to store your grains carefully, like I said, in the buckets with the game lids. The game lids are just easy to get off. The others, I've got a little black handle you can pry them off, but I can't get them off otherwise. You can buy grains in just buckets this size, number 10 cans. I picked this up at a store when I was shopping one day. It was just a good price on it. A little bag. It's 17 ounces. So it's about a pound. If you wanted some smaller bags, you can get them. All grains other than like quinoa, where you have to rinse it and then get that outer shell off if you don't buy it pre-rinsed. Most grains you can just grind, but this one if you didn't buy the kind that's already rinsed, you have to rinse it, and you're going to have to dehydrate it. So if you're going to grind it, you might just want to buy it already rinsed. This one is not. When I cook it, I rinse it. So that outer shell makes it bitter. So you can start with just wheat or spelt. Spelt is an easier to digest grain. It's an ancient grain. Einkorn's an ancient grain, and I really like them. I wrote a book on einkorn, spelt, and quinoa one time. But it talks about how to use whole grain einkorn. Now you can get einkorn that's been sifted out, almost like an all-purpose flour. For people that can't have the wheat, that's a very good alternative. Or you can sift it out yourself and make your own all-purpose einkorn. So you can do that too. But with this meal, I'm going to set it. You just turn it. And again, you're going to have to follow your manufacturer's directions. I'm going to set it to the finest setting. Turn it on. You hear that noise? And you just turn it back one notch. And I guess I better get it all under there, or we're going to have flour all over the cabinet. We'll put in our grain. I've got a cup here. You can't turn this off. This one, you have to go by your manufacturer's directions, but you don't turn it off generally until it's completely ground. This one is, I don't worry about cleaning it because I don't do, if you're trying to do gluten-free grains, you can clean this. Some of them you can't clean. You may just have to have a dedicated grind. If you're doing regular grains and doing gluten-free for somebody in your family, you may just have to have 2. And you can get little, these really good brands. This company is probably the best brand there is out there. But they make one of these that attaches to your KitchenAid stand mixer. And it grinds really well too. It's just a smaller, it's not going to grind as much. I could grind quite a bit in here. Back on and send the sun. We'll talk about sifting some flour. Why would I want to sift? Now again, you could use this just like it is. If whole wheat is going to make too heavy, because it will make a denser product, nothing's okay. Now we have the whole wheat, and again, I usually sprout my grains, and I've got videos on that. And again, they keep longer, they're easier to digest. But if you wanted to use this plain whole wheat, you could. It's going to make a pretty dense product. I would take some of the bran out, if it were me, and makes it more like you can take as much or as little bran out as you like. If you're transitioning into whole grains, you want to take quite a bit out. But let me show you something taking it out. Here's just a hand sifter, and I'm going to put it on here with parchment, because when I get my flour ground, I can fold that up and put it right into my jar. Makes it a lot easier. So that's why I do that. I just have a regular jar with a canning spout. I can sift some of this out and I'll show you. And I'm going to get some bran out. I'll sift the rest of it since we only have a cup here. And it doesn't take but a minute to do this. I mean, it's very fast. But you want your flour ground on demand is just going to have all the nutrition. If you shake too much, you'll shake the bran through it. You'll see there's some bran in there. I'm going to put that back in because I'm going to show you how it sifts. You can do this method. You can do that 6 or 7 or 8 times, as many as you want. I'm going to take this same flour. I'm going to put it back in the bowl with the bran. I want to show you the bigger sifter. I'm going to see if there's any difference. Same amount of flour. Shake it. You're going to get a lot of bran out. This makes just pretty much all-purpose flour, but it's still more nutritious than all-purpose flour. One, all-purpose flour has oftentimes it's open when you buy it, but they take all the bran and all the nutrients pretty much out, and anything left in there is just synthetic and not that good for you anyway. This is a super, super, super fine flour, and I'm not finished yet. Let me show you this. That is so fine. Right, so lighten it up from the way it was. So I can keep it on my paper. And it's just a little more. Again, you can do these by hand. This fine mesh just really sifts out that bran. If you want all-purpose, I could stop here and say, well, that's all the bran I want to sift out. And I can keep sifting, and I can sift out even more. And it's going to be a lot more bran left in this container than that little bit in the other one. This one, if you want to make a really fine all-purpose flour, and it won't ever be as fine as this, it's going to take a lot of different sifts. I've done it. It works. It just takes a little extra. It won't be as fine as this. This is pretty much how to make all-purpose flour. You can do this with einkorn. Instead of buying that pre-sifted, you can grind your grain and sift your own. It's all a choice. But I like fresh milled flour to use. Cooking on demand, milling on demand. It's just going to be fresher than anything else. There's a lot of bran left in here. Look at how much bran's left in there now. A lot. So this is a really, really, really fine flour. If you want to get a little more through there, you could, but if you're wanting an all-purpose flour, that's your all-purpose flour. And what you can do, what I like to do, I'll sift half of this out. I might grind up 2 cups of flour, sift half of it out for my all-purpose, and it's not as, it still has some nutrients in it, don't get me wrong, it's still got plenty in there. But you have removed some, but you've lightened up the load for your baking. Get flour all over me. But I might sift half of it out of the 2 cups and leave 1 cup whole grain, or sift just a tiny bit out if I want to make a lighter bread. When I do sourdough spelt, I'll sift my flour, and I will sift out half of it to make my kind of all-purpose spelt, or what they call white spelt if you buy it, and then I will keep the other in my whole grain. So you can have 50% more. You can do 100%, but again, you're going to have a denser product, and it can be, most people are maybe, unless you're really used to it, they're not going to like it as well. But a softer, easier rise to your grains is adding some of that all-purpose that you sifted yourself, flour on demand. Just plan either the day before you're going to make bread. It's the best way. And then put this in your jar or your plastic bag with a Ziploc and put it in the refrigerator overnight, or grind it that morning and then make your bread that afternoon. You're making it on the weekend or something like that. You can take this, you can dump that right into your jar, and that right there is home ground, still very nutritious, all-purpose flour. You label it, put it in the freezer. This will keep 6 months or so in the freezer, but it's still got more nutrition than your all-purpose flour in the store, which often is bleached, has chemicals, has synthetic vitamins, and everything else is stripped out because it has a long shelf life. And they don't refrigerate it. It's designed to be shipped and put on store shelves. So people are making their own. Lots and lots of people are very interested in this kind of thing. I am. I like making my own. I think it's fun anyway. But apparently a lot of people agree with me because they're doing it. So if you want to get a mill your own flour, you can. And that's the process for doing it. Store this in a cool, dry place. Again, I would use it the day I mill it. If I'm not going to use it today, I would put it in my freezer. And if I've used sprouted grain, I do the same method, but sprouted flour if you want to. But it's not going to be as nutritious because you don't know how long it's been on that store shelf. So the most nutritious way is this, and really the cheapest way. Much less expensive to do this yourself. Thanks for watching.